Hey there, folks. The number one fan of betraying an entire genre of music to make god-awful bro country, here with another album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Post Malone record, F-1 Trillion. This is an album. Alright, blah blah blah, Post Malone. You know who Post Malone is. It's the guy that did Circles and Rockstar and Sunflower, one of the biggest pop stars on the planet for quite a few years now at this point. I don't necessarily think I need to give you the whole rundown of who this man is, but if you aren't aware, he's entered a country phase recently. For some reason. It's basically a stereotype at this point that white rappers will randomly stumble into rap slash hip hop as a genre, make a huge amount of money and get extremely successful from that, and then just sort of betray it and move on to a genre like country. And Post Malone may be the most devious example of that to date. A guy who made his entire career off of rap, suddenly completely ignoring it and going in a country direction in a way that feels less like a legitimate creative pivot and more like an excuse to just leave rap and participate in the whitest genre in the world with collaborations with people like Morgan Wallen, who are objectively just terrible individuals on a human level. Look, I'm not here to comment on Post Malone's relationship with any of the music that he's ever made over the course of his life or anything like that, but I will say there are some major culture vulture vibes going on here with this latest Post Malone album. Not only because, that's literally what occurred, but also because this album is, fucking terrible. I mean, authenticity as a topic of discussion and debate aside, this is just a god-awful country album. The worst kind of pop country being performed by a man that has previously had extremely little, at least public, experience in performing it, and certainly can't pull it off on F-1 Trillion, where he comes across as extraordinarily uncharismatic with some pretty terrible vocal work on a lot of tracks, and nothing really interesting to bring to the table from a songwriting perspective, in the same way that his last studio album, Austin, managed to feel like a soulless and shallow example of faux introspection and self-reflection for the sake of creating something more personal and appealing towards a more personable audience for commercial appeal. It feels like this album is trying to do the exact same thing but for a solely country audience, and it's just terrible to listen to the entire way through. And look, don't get me wrong, this isn't quite as obnoxious as that sort of bro country kind of thing you expect from Walker Hayes, Florida Georgia Line, or even Morgan Wallen himself, who is featured on here on the track I Had Some Help, a very bad song. And I can at least say that. That is technically a positive in the case of this album. It's not as bad as Country Stuff the Album by Walker Hayes, and I guess that's technically an achievement, even though most albums can achieve that no matter the genre. But I digress. From that perspective of, is it a awful, douchey, bro country kind of album? I don't really think it is. I just think it's a record that lacks earnesty and tries to portray itself as this extremely personal record when, at the end of the day, it just feels like a very disinteresting, vague record that's made to appeal towards people who are pop audiences with some more country leanings due to the modern boom of country music within the mainstream in recent years. And I don't know, I can't help but feel that there's absolutely nothing here of note in any way whatsoever from a perspective of performance from Post Malone or from a perspective of songwriting from him either. And then there's all the features, most of whom are pretty horrible musicians from the start. I mean, I don't want Morgan Wallen on any album. I don't want Blake Shelton on any album. I barely want half of the people on here that I like to be here because they don't work with Post Malone. Chris Stapleton, Sierra Farrell, Billy Strings, Dolly Parton is on this album. Why? These are all talented individuals that do great things on their own in their best moments, but then between them not working and meshing well with Post Malone's sound and some genuinely terrible musicians like Jelly Roll being featured on here, it's just absolutely baffling that anyone would really find this album appealing, at least to me. It's a 90% collaborative album, and all of the collaborations are awful. Earlier this year, Orville Peck released a similarly heavy collaboration-based album in the form of the record Stampede, and while I was not a fan of that that record either. I can at least say that it was genuinely earnest collaborations with people that varying degrees had some degree of connection with Peck's overall style. By comparison, Post Malone here on F-1 Trillion got a bunch of random megastars to feature on his album, forced them into the studio with him, particularly by, I don't know, forced probably by gunpoint, I imagine, and then spat out an album after those recording sessions. It's an album that doesn't feel genuine. It feels completely dishonest in every way a record can, and I can absolutely see why people are, at least in some circles, hating his guts right now for not only turning his back on the entire genre and fan base that got him to the point of fame that he's at right now in the first place, but also because he can't even pull off the new sound that he's trying well. This is a terrible country album. It's not just a bad Post Malone album, it's a terrible country album, period. Even if this was an absolute nobody making this, it would still be a god-awful record. At this point, this review's basically more of a rant than it is an actual proper review, so I'm just gonna cut it off here, but I will say with one final thought, it's god-awful, horrific pop country albums like these that make me thankful for people like Jason Isbell and Zach Bryan, and it's terrible albums like these getting as popular as they are that make me miss James Chance a whole lot. I'm going to give this record 1 star out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this quick album review. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.